Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Gittin Daf Nun Daled. We're starting about 12 lines from the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Beis, and the first words on the line are Rami de Rav Meir ad Rav Meir b'deoraisa. We've been discussing cases where potentially Rav Meir would give out knasos, the knas of shogeg atu mezid, which is something we find throughout Shas. The knas of shogeg atu mezid is that I'm going to slap you on the wrist when you do it by accident, so that we don't ever get you near the prohibition itself. So let's see how Rav Meir gets himself into a little bit of hot water. Titania, the Brisa reads, Hanoteh b'Shabbos b'shogeg yakayim. If a person accidentally plants a sapling on Shabbos, pretty impressive, I will say, pretty impressive. You plant a sapling on Shabbos by accident, what's the din? Yakayim, you can leave the tree. However, b'mezid, if you plant the sapling on purpose, the halacha is ya'aker, that you have to remove it. And all of this is Rav Meir. And the same Rav Meir speaks out of two sides of his mouth, because look what he says next. Same shita, uveshvi'is, when it comes to planting a sapling by shvi'is, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid ya'aker, it doesn't matter what your intentions were. If you plant a sapling during shvi'is, even if it's an accident, ya'aker divi Rav Meir. The Brisa continues and says as follows: Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'shvi'is b'shogeg yikayim b'mezid ya'aker. He has a total opposite in regards to shvi'is. U'b'Shabbos bein b'shogeg bein b'mezid ya'aker. Their shitas are completely flipped, and these are the two shitas. And this is a kasha on the shita of Rav Meir. Why? Because in the first case that Rav Meir listed, which was the case of Hanotea b'Shabbos b'shogeg, we see that he is not kones shogeg atu mezid. What do we see in the case of Hanotea b'Shabbos b'shogeg? He says yikayim, you're allowed to leave it. Yesterday, however, we learned that Rav Meir was of the opinion that we do have kones shogeg atu mezid. So how does Rav Meir get out of this problem? Says the Gemara, l'ta'amech, if you're worried about Rav Meir fitting with his shita in another brisa, you should probably worry about Rav Meir fitting within his own shita in the same brisa. What is the problem? L'ta'amech tikshilach higufa. We should see that within this very brisa, we have a conflict in terms. What's the conflict? Says the Gemara, 6 lines from the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Michli ha deoraisa v'ha deoraisa. The case of Hanotea b'Shabbos is deoraisa, and the case of planting trees during Shvi'is is deoraisa. So Maishna Shabbos, where we see that Rav Meir is mechalik between shogeg and mezid, u'Maishna Shvi'is, where he says bein b'shogeg bein b'mezid ya'aker. So the Gemara says, Ela Hasam, over there by Shvi'is, we actually have Rav Meir's actual svara. Kedikatani Taima, he gave his own reason. And the Brisa reads as follows: Amar Rav Meir, a few lines from the bottom on Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Mipnei mani omer b'Shabbos b'shogeg yikayim b'mezid ya'aker. Why is it that when one plants a sapling by accident on Shabbos, I am mechalik between shogeg and mezid, but uveshvi'is bein b'shogeg bein b'mezid ya'aker, no matter what, even if it's an accident, I have to uproot it. Says the Gemara, a halachic svara. Mipnei sheYisrael monin l'shvi'is ve'ein monin l'shabbosos. That when a person plants a tree, their brain is like tied to shvi'is, but not to Shabboses. So because our brains are tied to shvi'is when we do our counting, so therefore we're concerned about the case of shogeg atu mezid. So there Rav Meir is going to say, yes, we have a knas of shogeg atu mezid by the world of a sapling planted b'shogeg on shvi'is. Ma'ashe'enken on Shabbos, we are not concerned about that. Ve'ein monin l'shabbosos, we are not worried about that, because people, as Rashi says, she'ein, on the top Rashi, she'ein monin yamim l'netia ela shanim. The only time we ever refer to how old a tree is not by what Shabbos parsha we planted it, it's how old is it in years. And therefore we're not concerned by Shabbos. So in the case of Shabbos, he doesn't have to be kones shogeg atu mezid, because that's not how people count trees. No one's ever going to come to do it on purpose. But by Shvi'is, because people do count by the years, we're afraid that a person may say, I'm going to intentionally, I'm not going to say it out loud, but I'm going to quote unquote accidentally, intentionally drop that sapling into that hole that I just dug. Therefore, we're kones shogeg atu mezid. And then the Gemara presents, on behalf of Rav Meir seemingly, a second reason as to why it is that Rav Meir distinguishes between Shabbos and Shvi'is. And the Gemara says on the top line of Nun Daled Amud Aleph, Davar Acher, here's another reason. Nechshedu Yisrael ala Shvi'is, v'lo nechshedu ala Shabbosos. Jews have a greater Yetzer Hara for the world of Shvi'is, more so than they do for the world of Shabbos. We could understand that. right? Because the level of emunah that is required to keep a year of Shvius, you need to not only plan for the year that you're in the final year before Shemitah, you have to plan for the next year and the many months it will take to grow crops. There's a lot of emunah there, big Yetzer Hara. Shabbos is not only easier to keep, it's the sweetest part of the week by far. I love you people. I love learning with you. Shabbos is better. We all agree Shabbos is incredible. I was at a guy's house this week doing a circle. I know, that's the sweetest of the sweet. Sweetest of the sweet. If we just got some blinds up there so I could actually see in the afternoon, it would sweeten the deal a little bit better. But we learn an hour before sunset. So by definition, the sun's always in the same spot when we learn. So the Gemara says there's a bigger chashash by Shvius that someone's going to go astray, not true by Shabbos. Says the Gemara, why did you just give me two reasons for the same thing? This isn't a feel-good shiur. This is meat and potatoes halacha. So why did you give me two reasons? You gave me the first concern, the Jews don't count trees by Shabbos as they count them by years. And then you gave me this second concern, they're only nechshedu on Shvius, but not by Shabbos. So my davar acher. Why does the Gemara present a second svara as to why it is that Rav Meir distinguishes between Shabbos, where he's not kones shogeg atu mezid, and Shvius, where he is kones shogeg atu mezid? Says the Gemara, hachi kamer. V'chitema Shabbos nami. There might be a Yetzer Hara by Shabbos too. What's the Yetzer Hara by Shabbos? Because we know that Orla is restricted for 3 years. Now, is it 3 years times 354 days? No, that's not the case. As long as a tree is planted 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, it counts as year one. Let's say that 30th day before Rosh Hashanah is a Shabbos. Huge Yetzer Hara, right? Because I save a year of fruits. I get a year out of fruits in 30 days. Says the Gemara, Zimnin de Mikla Yom Lamed B'Shabbos, Inatahu Yomahu Desalka Leishata. If I would plant on that 30th day before Rosh Hashanah, and it happens to be a Shabbos, those 30 days count as my first whole year of Orla. So now instead of having 3 years of restriction, I have 2 years and 1 month of restriction. I have a Yetzer Hara. V'lo, lo salka leishata. And if I wait till Sunday, 29 days before the year, doesn't count as my year. And therefore, tashma, I need a second svara because there's a big Yetzer Hara by Shabbos too in this one scenario. Davar acher nechshedu Yisrael al Shvius v'lo nechshedu al Shabbosos. Says the Gemara, the second reason it's brought because I want you to know that we're not concerned that a Jew is going to be mechal Shabbos 30 days before the beginning of a new year to save a year or to save 11 months worth of restriction on Orla. Now, all of that was the Rav Meir ad the Rav Meir. And the Gemara on Nun Daled Amud Aleph, 10 lines down, begins to chip away at Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Yehuda ad Rabbi Yehuda also lo kasha. Why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, was it a problem? Because the brisa that we started with today, Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that by Shvius, we say Shogeg is fine, and Mezid is not. Why is Rabbi Yehuda not kones shogeg atu mezid during Shvius? Why does he have any different halachic svaras than Rav Meir? Rav Meir was saying we're nechshedu on Shvius, we're not nechshedu on Shabbos. And we look in our brisa, what do we see by Rabbi Yehuda? Don't worry. If you plant a sapling during Shvius, b'shogeg, I'm not worried about shogeg atu mezid. Why not? Rav Meir was very worried about that. So says the Gemara, because be'asher Rav Yehuda chamira lehu Shvius, they were very stark about Shvius. Everybody kept it. You know, there's like some halachos that we don't keep, like Lashon Hara. There's like things that we're not religious about them. They're state and Shulchan Aruch, they're Psukim and Chumash, we're just not good about it. So, okay, in their culture, everybody was makbid on Shvius. How do we know? Because of the following anecdotal story. Two guys were having words with one another. They were kind of sharing barbs. One person said, "Daira bar dairasa, you're a ger, the son of a giores." I guess that's an insult in some cultures. Amar le, he said back to him, "Ana lo achle pire de shvis kavasach." I don't eat shvis fruit like you do, you shegets, right? Which is basically what he's saying. But what does that tell you about the culture? That tells you that in that place, only the shegets ate shvis. Everybody else was makbid. So we see that in the place where Rabbi Yehuda lived, that everyone was careful with shvis, and therefore there's no reason to be kones shogeg atu mezid. And that's why the brisa is the way that it is. Now let's start analyzing some brisas a quarter of the way down on Nun Daled Amud Aleph Toshma. Let's say achal truma tmeya. I ate truma tmeya. You're a kohen, and I ate your truma tmeya. I did it without permission. The halacha is mishalim chulin tahorin. I have to pay you back with chulin. That's tahor. Okay. But what if shilem chulin tmein? What if I ate your truma tmeya, but I reimbursed you? I paid you back with chulin tmein. So it says the Gemara, Mahu. This is a machlokes. Omar sumchus mishum Rav Meir. So basically, Rav Meir is talking now. What does he say? Bishogeg. If I paid you back with chulin tmein instead of chulin tahorin, bishogeg tashluma of tashlumin. It's now considered even. Even though I paid you back, what I shouldn't have paid you back, we're all good. The mezid ain't tashlum of tashlumin. If I'm being a jerk about it and I write, by the way, stole your food, paying you back with something that I shouldn't be paying you back with, here's some chulin tmein. If you do b'mezid, the halacha is ain't tashlum of tashlumin. What do we see by Rav Meir? He is not kones shogeg atu mezid. He doesn't give a knas in a case where there's a shogeg, when the other option could lead you to a mezid. V'chachamim omrim echad zeh ve'echad zeh tashlum of tashlumin v'choz mishalim chulin tahor. The chachamim say in both cases it actually counts for your doraisa, for your theft. However, we do slap you on the wrist that you still have to be chozer mishalim chulin tahorin. If you give chulin tmein, you were yotze, you checked the box with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. But the chachamim slapped you on the wrist because it's not good behavior. Okay, v'havinan, but let's analyze. B'mezid, if in fact I paid that person back, it was achal truma tmeya, and I paid him back with chulin tmein. If I did it b'mezid, amai ein tashlum of tashlumin. Why is it that we would even say that that shouldn't count? After all, tavo alav bracha. You should get a bracha for that, because a kohen is not allowed to eat truma tmeya, but he is allowed to eat chulin tmeya. So therefore, I paid you back with a perfectly edible food. So why does our Mishnah say, the Brisa here say, b'mezid, that you are not allowed to do that? And the Gemara says, I stole a food from you that you couldn't even eat, which is truma tmeya. V'kameshalem le, I paid you back with chulin tmeyin, midi dechazi le, b'mei tumaso. That's a good trade. So why does the Brisa say that if I pay the Kohen back b'mezid with chulin tmeyin, no dice? You really didn't do a good job. Rava says, and some say that it was Kedi, and as we've seen 15 times in Shas already, we don't know if Kedi was a person or if a Kedi is a reference to someone in general, like a broad name. We don't know who it is. Really, this Brisa says missing stuff halfway down on Nun Daled Amud Aleph. Here is what the Brisa should read. Really, if I was achal truma tmeya, I stole your truma tmeya and I ate it, or I destroyed it. Mishalim koldehu. It's useless to you. You can't eat truma tmeya. That food is ash. There's no value. You can't do anything with it. You're done. I can pay you back a koldehu. But this is the part that's missing. Achal truma tehora. If I took your truma tehora, which is very good food that you can eat, and only you can eat, then mishalim chulin tehorin. In this case where I stole chulin tehorin, if I stole a truma tahora, shilem chulin tmein, what if I paid you back with chulin that's tamei? There we have our machlokes. Sumchas Omer mishum Reb Meir mishogeg tashlum of tashlumin. The mezid ain't tashlum of tashlumin. Reb Meir says that in such a case where you are a kohen and I take chulin tahora from you and I pay you back with chulin tmein instead of chulin tahorin, we can't argue tavo la bracha because I stole the food you could eat and gave you back a lower quality food. It's not the first case. The tavo la bracha question was when I took food you couldn't eat and gave you back a food you could. Here I took your best food and gave you a less good food. They still argue in the same way. And what do we see over here? The difference between Rav Meir and the Chachamim is shogeg atu mezid, and Rav Meir again has shot himself in the foot, because on the previous page, not today, but yesterday we learned that Rav Meir does hold of kones shogeg atu mezid. And what do we see in this case? Where, let's be specific about the case and careful, we have to look at the chasurei mechsera, not the original brisa, of where I take a kohen's chulin tahora and I consume it and I pay him back b'shogeg with chulin tmeya. So then the din is b'shogeg, you're fine. No kones shogeg atu mezid. So Rav Meir, you can't dance at both parties. You gotta figure out what your shita is. Which one is it? Skip the parentheses. The Gemara says, wait a second. Hachi hashta. What are you talking about? The case that we learned yesterday, remember Mitame and Midame and Menasech, all those cases that we spoke about, that's very different than our case that we're talking about today. What was the case that we just described? I paid you back b'shogeg, but I paid you something wrong. Hasam gavra l'shlume kamechavein. I was trying to pay you back. I'm a good guy. I'm paying you back. Okay, I did something wrong. I'm asking, but I'm just trying to pay you back. When my shogig is to do a ma'aseh tov, we don't need kones shogig atu mezid. Anam nekum v'liknasei. You're right. I should have paid you back with chulin tahora. You're 100% right. B'shogig, I paid you back with chulin tmeis. The Kohen can still eat it. It's still edible. It was a shogig, says Rav Meir. In a case where you're trying to rectify the situation, there's no kones shogig atu mezid. In yesterday's sugya, where you're mitame someone's food b'shogig, you're in Russia. You're not paying attention. You're not even trying. Rav Meir says those cases are wildly different. Yesterday's cases is where you're not trying to be a good guy. You're not. You weren't doing a ma'aseh tov. You made an error. Slap you on the wrist with kones shogig atu mezid. But today's case, the case of I'm paying you back, but I paid you with the wrong thing. Now you're going to slap him on the wrist. It's the wrong time to give a knas. Then the Gemara gives a couple of other examples in a similar vein. Tashma, 3/4 of the way down, about 12 lines from the bottom. Tashma, dam shenitma v'zarku. The dam became tameh. The Kohen is standing by the mizbeach and he's zorek. If he did so b'shogeg, hortza. If he did so b'mezid, lo hortza. If he did so b'shogeg, so hortza, the language that we've seen that there's ritzui from the tzitz. The tzitz has a koach that it creates ritzui even by dam that has become tameh b'shogeg. So we say that the ritzui works, but b'mezid lo hortza. What do we see? A distinction between shogeg and mezid. Rav Meir, same question as we've been asking all day. You held yesterday in the case of Matame Medame and Menasech, you held Kones Shogeg atu mezid. Here we see a distinction, and Stam Mishnah Rav Meir. So therefore, we should have seen something different. Amar Dach Rav Meir, Hachi Hashta, again, same as the previous case. You're barking up the wrong tree. Hasam Gabr l'chpurika mechavein. When the Kohen did it b'shogeg, what was he doing? He was standing in the mizbech by the mizbech doing zrikas adam for chapara for the bailim. He was trying to do something good. We're going to slap him on the wrist and say, shogeg atu mezid. It's not hortza in this case as well. That's ridiculous. He's trying to do a good thing. In yesterday's case, he wasn't trying to do a good thing. It's not apples to apples. So yesterday, Rav Meir was kodesh shogeg atu mezid. Today, he's not. The cases are totally different. Two more cases like this. Tashma, ha-meiser b'Shabbos, ha-me'aser b'Shabbos, someone who takes off meiser, b'shogeg yochal b'mezid lo yochal, same kasha again. Where is our kones shogeg atu mezid? Says the Gemara, you're giving meiser. You're giving meiser. Hachi hashta, hasam gavra l'tikuni kamachavin. I'm giving meiser. I'm trying to fix up my food so that it's edible. I'm being frum. Anam leikum v'liknasei? Doesn't make sense. And for the last case, Toshma, Hamat bil kelim b'Shabbos. I'm not allowed to use this kli. I take it to the mikvah on Shabbos. Not allowed. Tikkun mana, whatever the halachic sugya is. B'shogeg yishtamesh ben. If you did it by accident, it fell into the water. Great example. Unlike my brother-in-law, who fell into the mikvah of kelim by himself, feet up in the air, head at the bottom. Great story for another time. But if you drop in a kli by accident into a lake, whatever, something that's kosher to be a kelim mikvah, b'shogeg, you're allowed to use that on Shabbos. Mutter, no problem. The mezid lo yishtamesh ben. Same question on Reb Meir. Yesterday you said kones shogeg atu mezid. Today you seem to make a distinction. Hachi hashta. What are you talking about? Again, it's not apples to apples. Hasam gavr letahore money. He's trying to be mataris kelim. That's not the time you slap him on the wrist. Anan leikum v'liknasei. That's not correct. Good. Now let's switch gears. Similar genre, but let's switch gears. The Rabbi Yehuda b'Derabanan. We have a similar issue with Rabbi Yehuda in certain Derabanan cases. The Tanya, turning to the top of Nundalit Amud Beis. In the world of Orla, the ratio of bittul is 1 to 200. If I have 150 pieces of chulin and I drop in 1 piece of Orla, the mixture is prohibited. If I have 201 pieces, really, if I have 200 pieces and I drop in 1 piece, really, if I have 199. 1 to 200, whatever the exact numbers are. It's machlokas itself. So the din is 1 to 200 is the ratio to allow for a piece of orla that has been dropped into chulin to be eaten. However, there are certain foods that are very chashuv. Let's look at this case on the top of Nundal Amud Beis. It's a brisa. It's a tosefta actually from Maseches Trumos. Naflu v'nispatzu. If something fell in, we don't know what fell in, and they got crushed. So let's take a look at Rashi. Egoze perech. It's a certain type of nut that was consumed. And ein betelin afilu be'elef. Even if the ratio is well beyond our normal bittul of 1 to 200, if it's 1 to 1,000, they're not batal mipnei chashivusan. But let's look at back in our brisa. What's the second word on the page? V'nispatu. It got crushed. By the way, we have this as a principle with a beria, for example. Let's say you're not allowed to eat an ant, right? But let's say you found out that the ant was in the blender. Your kid told you afterwards, oh, I saw an ant in the blender. You just made a protein shake. Are you allowed to eat it? Now you're allowed to eat it. Why? Because it's nitzpatu. It was broken up into pieces. So then there's bittul. But when it's a whole ant, that's what's called a beria. And a beria can never be, there is no bittul by a beria. So similarly over here, not identical, but similar. This nut is a chashuv nut, and it's an orla nut. And the ratio of bittul is 1 to 1,000. But what if you crushed it? So if you crushed it, echad shogeg ve'echad mezid lo ya'alu dibir Reb Meir ve'Reb Yehuda. They both agree that if it's echad shogeg echad mezid, the din is lo ya'alu. There's no bittul at all. Done. Reb Yossi, Reb Shimon Omrim b'shogeg ya'alu. If the bittul was done b'shogeg, no problem. B'mezid lo ya'alu. V'hahacha dimi deoraisa chad b'trei batel. Really, we know that if you have 3 units, 1 to 2, that is considered bittul, right? The Rishonim here are done what that means, not here, but elsewhere in Shas. Does that mean 66.666 versus 33.333, or does it mean 51? Because it didn't say 51 out of 100, it said 1 out of 3. So you have to figure out exactly what bittul is. 66% is the line of the matir, or is it really 51%? Not for now. But let's just talk midoraisa. Midoraisa, really the bittul should have happened chad b'trei. V'rabbanan hu de gazor. It's only the rabbis who made these 2 layers. The echad b'masayim for orla is 1 layer, and the echad b'elef is a layer on top of a layer. That's all a din de rabbanan. And previously we learned that Rabbi Yehuda does not kones shogegatu mezid in a din de rabbanan, but here v'kakanis Rabbi Yehuda. Here, the first shita in our brisa was, what did he say? Lo ya'alu divrei Reb Meir v'Reb Yehuda. That's a knas. That's a slap on the wrist of shogegatu mezid. Says the Gemara, you're right. And really, in general, Rabbi Yehuda does not give a knas by dine de rabbanan. However, hasam hainu taima de Rav Meir, de Rabbi Yehuda, 5 lines down, 6 lines down. Mishum de asi li'yarume. Here, it's very easy to get sneaky. To do ha'arama is to do a loophole, is to play the system, is to try and find a clever zach. So because we're concerned that people are going to make this problem, therefore Rabbi Yehuda over here made an exception. Says the Gemara, "V'rami de Rav Yosef ad Rav Yossi." There's actually a shiur within Rav Yossi's. Why? We just learned Rav Yossi at the top of the page, who distinguished between shogeg and mezid. And here, what does he say? Ditnan. We have a mishnah about orla. Nitiyah shel orla. If you have a sapling that's been planted, v'shel kiloi hakerem, or something that's kiloi hakerem, shenis arvu b'nutiyos acheros. I planted an orchard. 1 sapling went in. Oops! I planted 1 orla sapling among an orchard of regular trees. Harei ze lo yalaket. You're done. You cannot be malaket anything from there. V'im liket, if you did, yalu be'echad u'masayim. If you did, b'di'eved, then the bittul aspects that we need is 1 to 200. Ubilvad shelo yiskavein lelaket. But it has to be that you didn't have kavana to be melaket. What does Rabbi Yossi say in this brisa? Rabbi Yossi Omer, af hamiskavein lelaket, even if you did it intentionally, what's the din? Ya'alu be'echad u'masayim. So there we have a din that we allow for the bittul to take place. What did Rabbi Yossi say in our case? B'shogeg ya'alu, but b'mezid lo ya'alu. That was the brisa at the top on line 2. On line 3. What does he say? Yeah, 3rd line. He said b'shogeg ya'alu b'mezid lo ya'alu. B'mezid lo ya'alu. You just said over here, if you are miskaving to do so, ya'alu. So Rabbi Yossi, you would just associate yourself from the brisa at the top of the page to the brisa right here. So says the Gemara, ha'itmar Allah, no way. The reason why Rabbi Yossi is mekel is because of Omar Rava. Rava says, Chazaka, ein adam oser es karma b'netiya achas. No one will let it happen that 1 sapling will ruin a whole orchard. You're going to paint that one red. Everyone's going to know that it's an orla tree. You'll tie a ribbon around it. There's no way. It is such an unlikely scenario that you're going to inadvertently put an orla tree in an orchard and mess up your whole orchard. It's such a big error that it won't happen. And therefore, he's mekel in that case because the assumption is lekula. V'chein ki asa ravin amar Rav Yochanan chazaka ein adam oser es karmo b'netiya achas. No one's going to ruin their whole kerem, their whole vineyard b'netiya achas by planting 1 orla vine in that case in a kerem. There's no way. And therefore, he's mekel. But really, Rabbi Yossi is still, like he had said at the top of the page, that b'shogeg yalu, b'mezid lo yalu. And now we're done comparing all the Rav Meirs and Rav Meirs and Rav Yehudas and Rav Yehudas. We threw in Rav Yossi and Rav Yossi for good measure. But that's been the whole day so far and half of Shabbos as well. Let's move on to a new Mishnah. We're a third of the way down on Nun Daled Amud Beis. We'll be going to the Mishnah on the top of Nun Hey Amud Aleph. The Gemara reads in the new Mishnah, HaKohanim shepiglu b'mikdash, and this we already know from yesterday. We saw this quoted as a Mishnah yesterday. Kohanim who were mefagel, they had in mind to do something wrong over here. They were mefagel. They had intention that this food would be eaten chutz l'mekomon, chutz l'zmanon, whatever the din is, mezidin chayavin. If they do so b'mezid, then they violated the issur of pigul. Tanu Rabbanan. We'll come back to this particular Mishnah in a minute. But the Gemara opens with a brisa that says as follows: Haya'osa imo b'taharos. Let's say you hired me to take care of your taharos. The Omar lo. When I'm done, I walk over to you and I say, look, it's been a long day. I'm really sorry. Taharos she'asisa imach nitzma'u. I messed up. I know you paid me for this, and it's a mekach tos. I'm really sorry. Or Haya'osa imo b'zvachim. I was taking care of korbanos from you. V'amar le. And he said, "V'amar lo." At the end of the day, "Zvachim she'asisi imach nispaglu." I was in a cranky mood, and when I was bringing these korbanos, I was mefagel. I had these thoughts as to when I was going to eat where I was going to eat these, and I messed them up. The din is ne'eman. We believe the worker to say his mess up is true. However, and with only the slightest of distinction, look at this. Aval amar lo. I'm a little bit more than a third of the way down. Aval amar lo taros she'asisa imach. Beyom ploni nitmu, not today. Yeah, a couple of days ago, I was working for today's Sunday. I was working for you on Friday. I'm telling you now, on Sunday, I messed up with the taros uzvachim she'asisimach beyom ploni nispaglu eino ne'eman. If I'm testifying, I walk out of the office right now and said I messed up right now, no problem. You're guilty. We believe you, ne'eman. But if I say that I did it a couple of days ago, I messed up your taros a couple of days ago, or I was mefagel the zvachim we don't believe you. Unbelievable. You're the same guy. It's the same mice. So you did the same exact thing. So the Gemara calls out the obvious question: Maishna Reishno, Maishna Sefa. What is the difference between the two cases? I'm the same guy. You're the same guy. I did the same thing wrong in both cases. The first part of the brisa says you're Naaman because I did it with no days separating. The second part says I'm talking about Friday. Ain't no Naaman. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, Kol Shebiyado Naaman. When it's biyadcha, right now, you just left a scenario that's biyado, then you're ne'eman. But the time gap doesn't work. The time gap, we assume you're actually not telling the truth. Rishonim spend time here. We don't have time. This requires fine-tuned distinctions and chakiras to understand what exactly is going on here. Rava gives a little bit of a different answer. Rava Amar, no. Kigon de ashkeche, I saw you, I did my pigul and I did my messing up on your taros on Friday. I saw you on Shabbos, Kigon de ashkeche velo amar le velo midi. I saw you on Shabbos and said nothing. Ulevasar hachi, on Sunday afternoon by mincha I saw you, and ashkeche velo amar le, that's when I told you. And that is when you are not believed. Again, Ayin Sham in the Rishonim, we don't have time. I wish we did. This is the fun stuff, is when you can learn what Rava was really thinking, what Abai was, these subtle distinctions. And they have massive halachic implications. Let's talk about, massive business deals. You asked me to be responsible for all of your korbanos, 10 cows, $3,000 a pop, $30,000 of cow. And I come home, I'm like, messed it up. So you either lose $30,000 or you don't, and the difference is when the guy told you. So you got to figure out in the Rishonim why this is the case.
Backwards legal, meaning I could go right back in there and do the fagel everything, therefore believe me that I wasn't fagel.
Something like that. Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. Now, that's probably what we'll see in some of the Rishonim, but again, you have to, you also have to understand the difference between Abaye and Rava, which is very, very, very subtle. It's very dark. It's not a very clear distinction. Sounds like they're saying the same thing, actually. Okay, Gemara tells a story about this. This guy came home from work one day and he said, b'yom ploni. Remember, this is version 2, which everyone agreed. Eino ne'eman. So the guy went to Rav Ami and said, my worker just told me all my stuff is messed up. What should I do? Says the Gemara, Amar le, Shuras Hadin. Technically speaking, Eino ne'eman. The guy has no ne'eman. It's just like we saw. That was the second part of the brisa. So the guy says back to Rav Asi, he says, Amar lefanav Rav Asi, he says, Rebbe, Ata Omer Kain, I know you say that it's Eino ne'eman, but I could bring you a raya from somewhere else that it's in fact a problem. Hachi Amar Rav Yochanan, Mishum Rav Yosi, Ma e'ese, She'atorah he'eminto. There are times that we do believe people after the fact, against our brisa. Heichi he'emintu. Where do we see a case where we believe someone, even with a time gap, against the brisa? Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Bisna, Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim yochiach. The Kohen Gadol goes lifnai v'lifnin, into the Holy of Holies, a place that we are not allowed to access. We're not even supposed to look. We know the boxes that they made to fix the walls were multi-sided boxes, so they couldn't see the menorah. They couldn't see inside. They only saw the walls that they were fixing. They were lowered and raised on ropes. How can the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur be a proof? Dechi Amar Pigul Mehemen. When the Kohen Gadol walks out of the Kodesh HaKodashim, if he said, I was mefagel with what I did in that room, the din is that he's ne'eman. But umino yadinan, how would we have ever known? The pasuk says, "V'chol adam lo yeh be'oel moed." Elolav, it must be mishum demehemen. It must be that when he walks out of there, we know his walking patterns. Remember, we learned this about, we had the exact walking patterns. I think we drew some things at the time way backwards. I haven't drawn things in a long time. Probably should. Okay, the Gemara says that we actually believe him. Says the Gemara, "V'dilma deshamani depagil." Maybe he screamed it out. I'm bringing your korban, Klal Yisrael, and I'm going to eat it outside of the right place and outside of the right zman. So maybe we heard him talking. Says the Gemara, no. Ilav de vehemen. If not for the fact that we would have believed him, who cares what he said? Afal gav de shamini and nami lo mehemen. We wouldn't have believed him even if he would have said something. Maybe there was a time gap. Maybe he actually finished the korban already, and he was just trying to stir everybody up. And 10 minutes later, he's like, Pigul. The reason we trust him is because we trust him, not because we saw. Says the Gemara, Dilma, maybe you're wrong. The Dilma de Chazine befish peish. Maybe someone actually saw through the pishpesh, which was a very small point of access that could see into the actual heichal, into the actual kodesh. Says the Gemara, you're right, Kasha. And we end this piece of Gemara shrouded in curiosity because we don't know if we actually believe him or not. We just don't know. It seems like there's some ne'emanus, but we undermine that a little bit because maybe someone saw and our visual verification of his verbal declaration of people might be enough. So it's a little bit unclear as to whether or not we would say against our brisa that eino neman. Our brisa says eino neman when there's a time gap, separating what happened and your words, a possible separation. Story. Well, I should say halachic story. We're 3/4 of the way down, 3 lines before the wide lines. Says the Gemara, Hu da'asa l'kamid Rabbi Ami. Amar le, a man says, Sefer Torah kosavti leploni, the Sefer Torah that I wrote for this particular person, azkaros shelo lo chasavtim lishman. Every time I wrote Shem Hashem, I did so shelo lishman. That's not good. That's not nice, it's not good. Amar le, Rav Ami said back to this person, Sefer Torah biyad mi. Where is the Sefer Torah right now? Who has possession? Amar le biyad lokeach. It's in the hands of the purchaser. Amar le ne'eman ata lahavsid tzcharcha. I believe you enough that you should lose all of your salary. A year's worth of work down the drain. You have to give back $50,000 because that's what you had agreed to be paid, and that's what he paid you, and you messed up. But but you can't actually ruin the whole Sefer Torah. This is halacha at its finest. You're a jerk, and you have to give back all of your money, but the Sefer Torah is kosher. Unbelievable. Says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Yirmiyah, wait 1 second, I'm confused. I could understand, for as many times as it says Shem Hashem in the Sefer Torah, let's take however many words there are in the Torah, subtract the number of actual Shemos Hashem that he wrote, you should deduct that from his salary. But Schar de Sefer Torah Kule, Mihifsid, 99% of the words that he wrote were perfectly fine. He had a great kavanas. All the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Shem Adnos, was it Elokim, was it Kel, all the I have no idea. I don't know what Shemos Hashem are. But that's not fair. So Amar Le, yes, absolutely. This guy lost everything. Why? Shekol Sefer Torah Sheinas Kar Shelaksuvas Lishman Eino Shave Klum. Because if you write a Sefer Torah, Bereshis Bara Elokim Es Hashemayim Es Aretz, by the Bar Shem how many times have we seen that pasuk in the Torah? It's a zero. The whole thing is garbage. The Sefer Torah is not a Sefer Torah. It doesn't get kvura. You don't stand up. It's not a Sefer Torah. It has chashivus to it because Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's shemus. It needs gniza, but it's not a Sefer Torah. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. I have a great solution for you. 8 lines from the bottom. Go get a quill. Go get an inkwell. Go get the Sefer Torah. Start from the beginning. A little bit of ink over every Yud Kei Vav Kei, and then make it lishma after the fact. No problem. It's fine. Solve the problem. Says the Gemara, because our Gemara does not suggest that as a practical solution, it must be Kiman. It must be that Nema Delo Kiman, Nema must be Delo Reb Yehuda. Why? Reb Yehuda holds that there's a problem with this. Ditnan. The Mishnah writes, and we are corrected here that it's actually not a Mishnah, it's a Brisa on the side we have here in the Gos V'Tzionim, it's a Brisa. We've seen this Brisa twice, 3 times, maybe more. A person was intending to write Yud Kei Vav Kei. V'niskaven lichtov Yehuda, was supposed to, Vaydaber, it was supposed to say Hashem. In his head, he got it stuck in his head, he's supposed to write Yehuda. It's very close, just the Dalet, right? So it says the Gemara, V'niskaven lichtov Yehuda, Vaydaber, and in his head, he should have written Hashem, he meant to write Yehuda. Then he messed up on writing Yehuda and wrote Hashem, okay? The Tav, V'lo hitil bo dalis, and he didn't put in the Dalet. So it says the Gemara, what does the Tanakama say? Ma'avir alav kulmus u'mekadra divi Rabbi Yehuda. What does Rabbi Yehuda suggest? Go solve the problem. Just go back. Because our case didn't suggest it, we don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, this is not correct. Our story is like the Chachamim. This is not how we write Shem Hashem. Start over, you messed up. So says the Gemara, perhaps our case is not like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says you should have gone over it with a kulmus. You just cover over all the letters with ink. Says the Gemara, no. Afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda might even agree with this case. Why? Ad kan lo kama Rabbi Yehuda ella bechada azkara. When is it? What was our case? Our case was that the name should have been Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Sofer was thinking in his head Yehuda, and he wrote Yehuda wrong and wrote Yud Kei Vav Kei. In that case, Rabbi Yehuda's maskim, Mavir Alav Kulmas, no problem, because it's only one usage of a letter. Aval de Kule Sefer Torah lo. But to go over every Yud Kei Vav Kei in the Torah is not going to look nice. He says, Mishum de Mechse Kimenumar. It's going to look like a leopard. It's going to look spotted. We know if you've ever laned and you've seen a Sefer Torah that's been fixed, you always know when it's been fixed. There are scratch marks from a scalpel. There's letters that don't look the same. The inks are shinier. You can always tell. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, our case is even Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda would not say with this guy, this Sofer who said every Yud Kei Vav Kei I messed up on. Rabbi Yehuda, would you say, no, not over there. Only when it's 1. But when it's 1,000, no, because then the Sefer Torah looks bad. That's not Zekeli Van Vei, that looks bad. You need to start over. So it could be that even Rabbi Yehuda would agree in our case that with all of the hundreds of times, I don't even know how many times Yud Kei Vav Kei appears in Chumash, all those times, it would be Mechse Kimenumar, it would look spotted, and therefore you're not allowed to do that. And a similar case, a contrasting case that we have to figure out why is different. This guy went to Rabbi Abo, Amarle, Sefer Torah shekasafti leploni, I wrote a Sefer Torah for someone, and forget about the ink. Gvilin shelo, lo ivadim lishman. Every piece of parchment, shelo lishma. I prepared everything. By the way, if you've ever seen a video on how they prepare parchment for ksiva, it's incredible how they get from a piece of skin to a cloth. Stretching many days, potions, liquids. You should find it on YouTube. It's fascinating how they make parchment. And then our Sifrei Torah look as gorgeous as they do, perfectly thin the whole way through. It's an amazingly complicated process. This guy didn't do it lishma. So here, Amar Le, what does Rabbi Abahu say? Different than Ravami said in the previous case. What did he say? L'sefer Torah biyadmi. Same question as before. Who has it? Ayin Sham in the Rishonim. Amar Le biyad lokech. The purchaser has it. Amar Lo mitoch she'ata ne'eman lehafsid scharacha. Because I trust you enough that your salary has been dropped to 0, you have to give all the money back. Ata ne'eman lehafsid sefer Torah. In the previous case, we didn't say that. When we said that the Yud Kei Vav Keis were not kosher, we said the Sefer Torah was still kosher. You lost, remember the bifurcation, you lost your salary, but the guy already has it in his possession, it's kosher Sefer Torah. Here, we're not even offering that. Rabbi Abba was more strict. If you had the Gevil if you didn't have the Gevil in mind for Lishma, the parchment, it's a 0. So asks the Gemara, the obvious question on the top of Nun Hey and Aleph, almost done. Umay Shnami the Ravami. The case of Ravami, he said the Sefer Torah was kosher. So why is it that over there, when he said that I wrote Hashem's name Shalom Lishma, the Sefer Torah is still kosher, but over here when I say the parchment is not Lishma, it's not kosher? So says the Gemara, Hasam, in the parchment case, Ikla Meimar, that Toyi de Rabbi Yirmiyah, maybe he got confused with the case of Rabbi Yirmiyah. That if we look a little bit back on the previous page, we'll see that. Whereas Rabbi Yirmiyah on the second of the wide lines, he said, well, it could be that it's different for the Azkaros, and we're not going to ruin the whole Sefer Torah, so maybe it's a little bit different over there. You should still be able to get paid for the rest. But Hacha, Kevin de Kamafsid Kule Agre, Here, because he said that even the parchment upon which all the ink was written was a zero, you could have written it on thin air. The Asav Amar, he came and admitted, therefore, Amor Kushta Ka Amar, we assume that he's telling the truth. We'll stop right here and pick up with a new Mishnah on Nun Hey Amud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.